Okay, disprove this then. I know what it means. I set up with
Welcome
a
to your
bodyguard
worldview.
in my brain. I set up with a bodyguard in my brain what that means, and you can't disprove it. We've really only talked about naturalism so far. I really have some theism questions for you.
No. Look,
we're like 30 minutes
hold
into
on.
open
No.
dialogue.
How
and
do we
we've
talk?
only done me.
How do we talk about theism from a position that argues that talking is a determined effect that we have no control over?
Promote the truth spills into many other areas as well. Please join me in welcoming Eric Planet Peterson. Excellent. And Jimbob is a published political cartoonist, commentator, and debater who focuses on culture and theology. Please join me in also welcoming Jimbob. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. I have the timer set for you. Planet Peterson, the floor is all yours for 15 minutes.
Hello. There we go. Okay. Naturalism or theism, what best explains reality? I should point out that we really didn't have any clarification about this debate beyond just the title of it. So if at any point you hear, like, Eric must do blank or he loses the debate, I think that's just a strategy to pigeonhole a very broad discussion into a narrow scripted version to try to give one side home field advantage. Since the premise here is what best explains reality, I will be going with methodological naturalism, which is just the belief that the natural world should be explained through natural mechanisms and that the supernatural should be excluded. I hope the discussion today will be about explaining reality, the topic of the debate, and not some meta conversation about how if naturalism is true, then a mechanistic universe that is purely cause and effect doesn't allow for knowledge. If you can't allow for knowledge because everything is a mechanism caused by a previous mechanism, then coming to the conclusion that naturalism best explains things is deterministic and cannot be known. This is a terrible category error, the fact that beliefs can be described in terms of the physical arrangements and neural patterns that produce them doesn't collapse their epistemic value. Knowledge is justified true belief, and truth is that which corresponds with reality. So whether something is true or false isn't determined by how it's instantiated physically, but whether it accurately represents the world. Saying naturalism can't account for knowledge because a thought has a physical basis is like saying calculators don't work because they just move electrons and flip switches. Of course they work. Just check the numbers. Now, sometimes calculators don't work, but we actually know how to check that. Go back to JTB, and thoughts work the same way too. Naturalistic mechanisms and the work done under the premise of methodological naturalism has the most unprecedented track record of success, and it's not even close. It's called science. It also has an incredible track record of burying long-held theistic beliefs about nature. Theism has never replaced a single scientific discovery, and it can't. The mere fact that naturalism in the form of science has this success record is overwhelming evidence that it is more likely to be true and certainly the most useful model. Any scientist at any prior point in history, in any culture, as long as they have the same technology and prior knowledge, is incredibly likely to come to the same conclusion as any other scientist. Our thoughts and ideas contained in our merely physical brains, operating in a merely physical world, work across centuries and across cultures, which is incredibly strong evidence that they are truth-tracking. Meanwhile, under theism, whatever that is, you get wildly contradicting answers. Earth may be thousands, millions, billions, trillions of years old, created by one, two, many gods, isn't created at all, and God is just there. Sometimes they intervene, sometimes they don't. They may change, they don't, and countless other differences. There are not multiple different natures, but there are multiple gods. To say theism better explains reality is to make the claim that multiple contradictions are simultaneously true. This debate is already over, but let's have fun. Even if I grant that God exists and that some miracles have happened, that God really did save that baby that almost got hit by the bus, what in the grand totality does this explain? Almost nothing. It's like debating, does science better explain nature or does Jimbob? Well, I can prove Jimbob exists. He's right there. I lost my spot. So, did I just concede that imaginary debate that we're not happening? That we're not having? No. Am I acknowledging the opposition? No, because granting that Jimbob exists in that example doesn't grant any additional explanatory power to the other side. Naturalism, natural law, physics, this explains every single thing that currently has an explanation. There's no non-naturalistic explanations. There are arguments, sure, claims, yes, but zero explanations. There's no working model for theism, for deism, for God, etc. All theistic explanations are post hoc, and because nobody knows how a God does anything, because nobody knows how supernaturalism works, there just is no explanation. So we'll run sort of like a thought experiment here. How many things do you think have ever happened, ever? Well, let's just wildly underestimate it, and we're going to say 10 to the 100th power. That's how many things have ever happened. How many miracles or supernatural events do you think have ever happened? Well, let's wildly overestimate this number, and we'll say 100 trillion billion 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 billion. That is 10 to the 50th power, which is a big number, but it's 50 orders of magnitude away from the non-miracles. Now, 10 to the 50th is not half of 10 to the 100th. It's 50 powers of 10 smaller, 0.49001%. So if somebody came up with an explanation that explains that little, I think that's basically the same thing as it doesn't really explain anything at all. And to demonstrate to you how absurd that is, 50 orders of magnitude is the equivalent difference between a single grain of sand and the size of the entire Milky Way galaxy. And remember, we radically underestimated the upper value and radically overestimated the lower value. Now, if you think I'm being disingenuous by framing it that way, I think I can prove that I'm not with another hypothetical. So we're going to pretend that God exists, and he stands atop of a hill, and he magically makes a boulder appear. God could absolutely do that. I think we all agree. And then I don't know if I said this, he rolls the boulder down a hill. So I'm granting God, I'm granting at least one miracle, but when it comes to describing what's going on here, the rock, its properties, the environment, the motion of that thing, its composition, literally everything about it and everything about its relationship to its environment is explained by naturalism. And this gives us countless things. Now, it doesn't explain everything, but that's not the point, because we're looking for a best explanation. It only has to account for the majority or plurality of things. So it doesn't explain how the rock came into being, but we don't have an alternative explanation either. Just because we witnessed it happen or because we say it happened isn't an explanation. That's just a declaration. But the naturalism, it has the potential to explain every useful aspect of what's going on. And what's great about my model is that it's infinitely recursive. There is no limit to the number of permutations between the properties and the description of this rock, or we could have imagined that hypothetical in any other way. So what if we changed, so it's on a hill, it's rolling down a hill. What if the slope was 1% different, or 10%, or 0.000000001%, or 99% different? What if the rock were bigger or smaller by any amount at all? The model will account for every single one of those things. There is no alternative that you will be able to come up with under theism that can do anything like that. And here's the kicker. I think you have to borrow from naturalism, even if I grant God to do anything useful. What if God magically made a bigger rock in this example? How would the way it rolls change? It depends on nothing about the qualities, characteristics of God or the time and place in which it happened. You'd have to appeal entirely to naturalistic mechanisms to explain this situation or event that has taken place here. So I don't think literally anything that's ever happened in my life, Jimbob's life, or any of your lives is explained by miracles, magic, the supernatural, etc. The best anyone has been able to do is confuse their own incredulity for evidence of the divine. I promise that nothing we would all agree is known will be or can be justified on theism, because we don't know how supernatural entities do anything. Remember, we're looking for an explanation here. My opponent, I think, will have no choice but to make the discussion about what we don't know and then insert theism into that gap. And I think that is a concession, because I can agree, we don't know, you included. Naturalism is not omniscient. It stops where the evidence stops. Theism, by contrast, starts where knowledge ends. That's my opening statement.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. We'll kick it over to Jimbob for his 15-minute opening as well. The floor is all yours.
All right, thank you. The topic is naturalism versus theism, which better explains reality. I want to point out that reality itself is a metaphysical claim. In fact, naturalism can't justify metaphysics. Now, I think this is the first time my opponent that I've ever debated opened with declaring the inability of his opponent to undercut his worldview. He's arguing for knowledge. He's arguing that knowledge exists, right? So even if I said, okay, I won't use the word knowledge, but I will argue that naturalism and specifically methodological naturalism, it assumes a whole slew of things that can't be justified under naturalism. We're talking about immaterial things that naturalism cannot explain the existence of. Now, naturalists always grant themselves this category. They grant themselves information. I've never stepped in information. They grant themselves facts. In fact, he wrote a book about facts, yet naturalism can't tell you where a fact is, but they rely on these things called facts, right? Knowledge itself, mind, right? He grants himself evaluation. By the way, under his view, evaluations would be merely naturalistic physical processes, right? Not distinct from the things he's describing. So to say naturalism can describe anything, right, is to say natural processes describe natural processes. Well, sorry, this is dominoes all the way down. So when we're talking about worldviews, this is a worldview debate. This is theism versus naturalism. This is a worldview. Worldviews typically consist of three branches: epistemology, which he doesn't want me to deal with, knowledge; metaphysics, which he cannot deal with, he has to grant himself; and usually ethics, but for the sake of argument tonight, I'm going to probably focus more on teleology, which deals with purpose. From my opponent's worldview, he would have to concede there actually is no purpose for him being here. None. In fact, if you took it more strictly, he was determined to be here. He had no say because there is no him. He was referring Jimbob exists. No. Under a naturalistic view, an object exists. There's no Jimbob or personhood. There's no identity over time. It's all nominal from his view. But again, he grants himself these distinctions, which are metaphysical, immaterial, and abstract. They're not found in nature. So, being that he's going to argue for methodological naturalism, a view that holds that reality, metaphysical, is best explained by natural causes and laws. It holds that science is the most valid way to gain knowledge, right? The problem is the claim that science is the best way to gain knowledge is a knowledge claim that's not gained by science itself. So what is he using for that? Well, he's using nothing because it doesn't exist in his worldview. There's no naturalistic process that gets him that philosophical statement, and yet he's here stating it. He doesn't account for that, right? So I'm not going to grant him any descriptions. He's going to get into math. Guess what? Math, where'd you find that? Where's that in nature? Where's the natural process called math? Nowhere. So where does it exist in the naturalistic worldview? It's tied to another thing, too. The only way to even get to science, by the way, which he's touting is the best way, the only way to get to science, you would know this in a basic philosophy of science course, is you have to start with non-scientific things to even do science. Everything he grants himself, meaning, information, mind, math, language, universals, particulars, laws of logic. What is the status of these things from a naturalistic worldview? Where do they exist? How do they exist? Why do they exist? He just grants himself and says, you can't talk about these things. This is about describing stuff. Sorry, describing things under your worldview is mere utterance from an orifice that happens to be at the upper side of your body. Actually, ontologically, no different than farting. Honestly. But he has another problem, because if you do a methodological naturalist view, you're also holding a type of ontological naturalism as well, or metaphysical naturalism, which is the belief that all of reality is composed of natural elements. There is nothing that exists beyond the natural world. Sorry, you just denied knowledge and information. Where are they located? Where are these facts you speak of? Can you hold them? Can you touch them? Can you smell them? Can you put them in your coffee? You cannot. So he's actually appealing to a bunch of things that he would argue have to either be non-existent and illusory or supernatural. That is to say, I'm not talking about ghostly. I'm talking about above nature, something that's meta-nature. It also denies truth itself. He's here arguing for the truth, and he has no ontology for truth. That doesn't make any sense. In fact, any proposition or utterance he makes is merely a determined effect. It's epiphenomenal from his mechanical device. That's why he wanted to make sure that I can't attack determinism, because he knows under his worldview, if all of our beliefs and utterances and counters and arguments, if they're all determined from a strict mechanistic body that we have no control over, how does he know which is true or false? There's nothing there. It's just matter in motion. So he comes here holding a view that he's strict matter in motion, and I'm strict matter in motion, and all of you are matter in motion. There's no persuasion. There's nothing being argued. There's just utterances in space and time. But then he grants himself, no, we can evaluate the utterances. No. Evaluations under your view, Peterson, are just more processes. They're just more processes happen. So if you follow naturalism to its logical ends, it leads to all sort of logical absurdities. For example, my opponent, like I said, will refer to facts in his rhetoric, yet his view defending tonight must reject the existence of facts because they're not empirically verified through his system. He's using evidentialism, science, empiricism. He's assuming a bunch of things before that he can't justify under that view. He just grants himself those things. He's going to do it all night. Or all morning, sorry. Woo. I mean, who debates naturalism at 9 a.m.? Definitely not either of us. Okay, so if my opponent holds that his view holds that everything is a result of natural processes, purely chemical and physical causal chains, if everything is the result of natural processes, then his own reasoning is an effect of this chain. When he makes an evaluation or utters a proposition, this is merely the effect of molecules in motion. Now, how is it there are true or false chemicals? This is an absolute defeater in his view. Forget the tag argument, you can't have knowledge. Okay, tell me. Let's make it really clear here. I have a simple syllogism. So, premise one, under naturalism, physical events are not true or false. They just occur. He grants himself evaluations. However, premise two, under naturalism, evaluations and propositions are physical events too. So what he's doing now is he's giving his evaluations, which he holds are strictly material, matter in motion, and he gives them a special pleading. He does a special pleading fallacy. He grants those set of molecules in motion a special position that they can evaluate other molecules. So his view is molecules evaluate molecules. So in simple form, If premise one is physical events are not true or false, they just occur. There's no true tornadoes. There's no true lion eating a zebra head. They're non-propositional. Premise two, evaluations and propositions are physical events. Evaluations and propositions are not true or false under naturalism. There's no way out of this unless you grant yourself some special condition for evaluations. So the question is, back to purpose, what are we doing here? Aren't we arguing for truth? That's not accounted for under naturalism. Did my opponent really fly on a plane to stand here to argue that his own reasoning is a set of chemical reactions and my chemical reactions are wrong and his are right? That's absurdity. How can a set of chemical reaction he calls his worldview be correct or incorrect? There are no true or false blades of grass. There are no incorrect tornadoes. Under my opponent's view, all propositions and evaluations must necessarily be physical processes and their determined effects of processes. He has no control over what he believes, and neither do I under his system. So what the hell is a debate? Let's make fart sounds with our mouth and then just pretend that either one of our positions can be evaluated for truth? There's no truth tracking under his view. He granted that in his opening as well. So there's no way for my opponent to challenge the syllogism without special pleading. Another issue is that my opponent must hold a dysteleological position, which is a fancy word for there's no purpose. As I said, there's no purpose for him being here. His brain is an effect of a long, unguided process of naturalism. His brain has no actual purpose. He would concede this, right? He would concede, my brain has no purpose. It's just doing what brains do, right? If there's no purpose, why is he debating? That's a performative contradiction. There's no purpose in him debating. His own brain has no real purpose. Under naturalism, there actually is no Eric Peterson. There's a biological mass doing what biological masses do. He just happened to end up here doing it. And you guys do. You're just biological masses. You're not actually listening to this debate under his view. It's actually, naturalism is almost an insult to humanity. Now, I want you to notice throughout the debate that Planet Peterson will grant himself a whole slew of things that naturalism can't explain. He'll grant himself mind, right? Thoughts, he said. Well, no, he said thoughts are in the brain. No, under your view, thoughts are the brain. You don't get thoughts from your view. Don't grant yourself thoughts. That's just the brain. He'll grant himself knowledge exists, laws of logic, information, facts, propositions, personhood. I don't grant any of those things. Not at all. So there's no reason to believe that knowledge exists under his view anyway, let alone do you have access to it. You have no ontological category for knowledge itself. Is it material? Is it universal? Do I have knowledge and you don't have knowledge and it's a certain pattern in my brain? Well, now knowledge and truth are a set of particulars. You have no access to universals. So why is theism a better explanation for reality? Well, I'm defining theism generally as the view that an absolute universal mind is behind the fundamental nature of reality, right? Reality consists of matter and immaterial. I hold a view that God created all things invisible and visible, right? You appeal to invisible things that you shouldn't. If you wanted to be consistent, you would deny those things, but if you didn't deny those things, you don't have science. So it's self-defeating. Your position's completely self-defeating. I call that mind God. Is there any good reason to hold this view? Absolutely. If we look at the category of things that my opponent grants himself in order to do science, you'll see that there's no grounding under naturalism, and those things are categorically conceptual and abstract. Well, what do we know about concepts and abstractions? They're located or dependent on a mind. He would agree with this. He would agree. Abstractions and concepts are associated with a mind. The problem with his view, which isn't a problem from my view, is that if we discover truth, if we discover logic, if we discover knowledge, meaning, information, and you agree it's mind dependent, and we're discovering it, that means that it existed in a way before we actually engaged with it, right? The other alternative is that he's making it up, that we're all just making up that truth exists. We're just making up with language, like a postmodern view, that we're just inventing it on the fly. Well, categorically, abstractions are mind-dependent. Laws of logic, invariant, absolute, universal, right? Under his view, there's no ontology for the laws of logic. He's going to call them descriptions. Sorry, descriptions require the laws of logic. They need to exist before you describe things. You need reference. You need references. You need language. So I argue that laws of logic, truth, knowledge, math, facts, meaning, universals, particulars, they're all conceptual. And because they're universal, they have to exist in a very specific kind of mind, a universal mind, not a particular mind. Human beings are particulars, each one of us, right? But we share, in humanity, we're a part of a universal called humanity, which he also denies. We're not going to talk about evolution, but that's not even possible under his view. It is totally reasonable to make sense of this category, being that the laws of logic are objective and universal. Knowledge and truth, math, facts, these are all things he has to assume are universal and invariant to do science. Where they're grounded, how does he ground these things? Well, a universal mind actually does ground these things. Even if he doesn't believe it, I can ground those things. He can't ground those things in pure nature. So what do we know about concepts? I went over that. Necessity of a mind, truth being absolute. The thing that he's going to have to really try to escape tonight, which is impossible, is the determinism entailment. If every utterance and proposition is completely determined by a set of biological, neurological dominoes, he really doesn't have any access or way of escaping this problem. It's merely looking at an effect of a previous cause, and the new effect is now the new cause of another effect, and so on. And it keeps going and going, right? An evaluation under his view. How many seconds?
30 seconds.
Okay. An evaluation under his view, or a proposition, is just another event. And as we know from naturalism, events purely in their form are not truth apt. So how does he have access to truth or explanation under his view? Before we talk about explaining anything, he needs to explain explaining.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that opening statement as well. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to our friends at Maine First Project for sponsoring DebateCon 6, as they also believe in the values of free speech and fair debate. Maine First Project is fighting for conservatism in New England and beyond, so check out their link in the description box below. With that, we're going to jump into the open dialogue, gentlemen.
I want to, there we go. I want to point out one thing, two things really. In my opening statement, I didn't know if this would actually happen, but I tried to predict what Jimbob would say, and that did happen. So the whole thing about if naturalism is true, then it's all causal and mechanistic, even your beliefs, therefore it just completely collapses everything. I addressed this, the fact that beliefs can be described in terms of physical arrangements and neural patterns that produce them doesn't collapse their epistemic value. Whether something is true or false isn't determined by how it's instantiated physically, but whether or not it accurately represents reality. And now I have a major regret, because there was something in my opening statement that I skipped over, and it was another prediction, and I'm going to show it to you all.
Post hoc predictions?
Because I wrote this document.
I'm kidding.
I really hope we don't hear anything about true or false tornadoes. I thought this was going to happen, and it did happen. Now, I do have a response to this, because I've heard Jimbob make this argument before. There's no such thing as a true or false tornado. It's just like a thing that exists in nature. And then also an extension of that is, if that's true for tornadoes, then if thoughts are just an effect of physics, then there's no such thing as like a true proposition or a thought or a claim, belief, whatever. The problem with this is there absolutely is such a thing as a false tornado. A tornado made out of ice cream is a false tornado. A panda is a false tornado. A tornado that drives a Lexus RC350 and has a girlfriend, that is a false tornado. There's no such thing as
Is this a false refrigerator?
Yeah, because it's not a refrigerator.
That's not an argument. You're just saying A equals A, and if something's not A, it's not A. That's not a defeater to the ontological problem that I
don't know what you think true means, but it doesn't mean exists. It's an evaluative
Truth doesn't exist. You heard it here, folks. Does truth exist?
That's not what I said.
Does truth exist?
In a way, yes.
No, in what way?
Well, let me finish this and then...
No, under naturalism, in what way does truth exist? Basically, there's two categories that I hold under my view. There's immaterial and material. And when we say what explains reality, reality under both of our views necessarily include immaterial things. So, but you're saying maybe not, right? So that's why when you grant yourself thoughts and evaluations, I argue that under your view, thoughts and evaluations are effects of previous causes, and they're new causes of future effects, and so on. You're saying, no, we can definitely describe tornadoes, we can describe things. I'm asking under your view, Peterson, in what way do they exist? The same way I asked you, how does truth exist? You say in a way, and I'm asking, in what way does it exist? It's not. Is it concrete?
Truth?
Yeah.
So I don't think truth is a thing. I don't think we could delete everything from the universe and still have truth. I don't think that makes any sense.
That's not
I
the
said
question.
Earlier that truth is an evaluative description of something.
Okay,
it's an artifact of language, I think.
Are evaluative descriptions, under your view, mechanistic and material in nature?
In the sense that they come about through agents that use reason and their brain to do that, then yes. It's a little confusing of a question, though.
It's not. You have a brain, and you're saying the brain does evaluations and makes propositions. I'm asking you the ontological status of those things, being that you hold them to be coming from the brain. It follows under naturalism that they come from the brain. They're also material and physical in nature. Are they or not?
I don't know exactly. So I think that entities such as myself, yourself, everybody here, we have beliefs, and I believe that they are produced by the brain. Mm-hmm. Now, what is the exact nature of them? Are they qualia? Are they something else? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, energy isn't physical, but we have a physicalist, materialistic description of what energy is, or like temperature. There's no such thing as the temperature within a container, because that is, it's not exactly emergent, but it's sort of just the temperature is a description of the physical state.
I understand. I'm asking for what is the status of descriptions themselves?
What is the status of
under
descriptions?
naturalism? Okay, let's do it more simple. Do descriptions exist under naturalism?
Kind of, in a way. So I would say descriptions.
In what
I would
way?
say descriptions are like behavior. Animals have behavior, and if we want to understand animal behavior or human behavior, that's just all going to be contained within in the organism itself. But it's an extension of it, a description. And so beliefs, or what did you say it was?
Well, I asked you. You said descriptions exist.
Descriptions.
I asked simple things like, because the debate is describing and explaining reality, essentially explaining reality. Under your view, you granted yourself facts. Let's go with facts. It's a little...
I didn't grant myself facts.
You do.
I described them.
Yeah, you assume they exist.
Yeah, but
facts exist?
But then I gave a justification for that. Correspondence theory, JTB, knowledge, all that stuff.
I understand. Do facts exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I
step in a fact outside?
No, because facts are also descriptions in reference to things.
Okay. So
and this totally collapses with your view.
No,
on
it doesn't.
this,
In fact,
it does.
No, it doesn't, because I actually have an ontological status and category for facts, and you don't. And so if we both agree facts exist, and you say, well, they kind of exist, and I go, in what way? And you're like, you're not sure. You just go back to descriptions. It's a circular position.
Can you tell me what facts are?
Facts are statements, right, that align with reality, but it assumes that there's something true worth discovering. So a fact is a discoverable description of reality. But
I don't even disagree with that.
Well, no, you would, because if you think it's discoverable, then a fact has to exist before you exist.
No, because you said the fact is in reference to something discoverable. A fact is that's like a thought or a proposition that agents have. If we all cease existing, then a universe still exists. The things in the universe are the reference that create the fact. The fact is like an idea that you and I have.
Okay, ideas. Perfect. Are ideas physical under naturalism or abstract?
I'm okay with saying that they're abstract, but like with the animal behavior analogy I gave, they're going to be emergent or an extension of purely physical things like you and I, because we're the ones that create or hold those.
To say they're emergent, are you arguing the school of emergentism that states that a system produces a novel epiphenomenal effect?
I I've never really heard of that. So what I'm just trying to do is give an analogy close to the temperature thing. Like, there isn't any temperature. That's not a thing inside that container.
It's an abstraction.
But it's described by the physical things.
That's what I'm saying, is that under your view, if you want to examine and describe reality, because you're relying on science and empiricism, you're relying on a whole slew of things that don't match your standard, your criterion for them existing. For instance, facts. You're having trouble telling the audience how and where a fact exists. Truth, knowledge, information. Certainly you think information exists, right?
Yeah, but I think that's also descriptive.
Okay, so when I ask him, does information exist, and he says yes, he says, but it's a description, and I say, oh, do descriptions exist? He says yes. So I'm asking under a naturalistic view that holds a purely naturalistic view. It's pure material, right? It's physicalism, right? It's physicalism. So all the things he says exist must be verified through his criterion, which is empiricism. And I'm simply asking him under his worldview, if he's going to say facts exist and descriptions exist, laws of logic exist, knowledge exists, information, meaning, and the rest, he's going to have to, through his own system, demonstrate how they exist. What way do they exist? He doesn't, his system is measuring it, right? His system is weighing it, looking at it. But he can't see these things. They're immaterial in nature. Naturalism cannot account for the immateriality of the category that he's using to then do science. He just grants himself this thing. Oh, we have evaluations. Yeah, knowledge and truth exist, but it's like, it's not identical to an apple. I know, but under your view, it must be. And so you have this view. Also, you said the term agency. You don't believe you have agency, do you?
Well, I said that I am an agent.
So can you be an agent and not have agency?
Like, are you asking me, does free will exist? Because that's what it
in
sounds
a sense, like are you actively, from your experience, from your worldview, pursuing knowledge and truth right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you could just adopt a compatibilist view that I don't believe that you freely actually make any decisions, but when you act in like accordance with whatever your desires are, then you are using your free will.
So you didn't decide or choose naturalism?
No, and you didn't decide yours either. It was preordained for you by your God.
Okay, wait, hold on. So if naturalism holds that I came to theism from a set of dominoes, and you came to naturalism from a set of dominoes, how could a set of dominoes be more true than the other?
How can one set of... Well, yeah, we would just use like a correspondence...
that would be more dominoes.
Theory of... Yeah, but that does... You're confusing the epistemic value of it with the like description of it.
Any descriptions would also be domino effects. Like anything you refer to as a process... Anything you refer to as a process is more dominoes falling. So I asked him if he believes that he came to naturalism, and he's debating. He actually didn't even choose to be here, in fact. But he was caused to believe in naturalism, and I was caused to not believe in naturalism. So how do we know what's true or false, right? If brain A, from his position, it's not a person, it's a brain. If brain A utters a proposition and brain B utters a proposition, I would ask under your view, what methodology do you use to determine which is true, A proposition or B proposition from a brain?
Right. So you're telling me that I'm still not accounting for knowledge. I am. Knowledge is JTB. Truth is that which corresponds with reality. So I can adopt a computational theory of mind, and then my brain takes in information from the environment and produces thoughts and beliefs, so it is part of nature. All other brains do the same thing, making them part of reality and nature as well. If everyone except one person agrees, then we know which brain doesn't correspond with reality. It's just like figuring out which calculator is broken.
Interesting.
And furthermore, if God exists, then God can manipulate your mind, and you can't know otherwise. So you're granting yourself knowledge when it's literally unjustifiable.
Hold on.
You have no idea if a demon is tricking you.
So that's actually an interesting point, which I'll get to. But first, you said computational, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What do we know about computers?
I don't know anything about computers, but
okay.
What do you mean by that?
Computers don't arise in nature, right?
Well, so I won't be able to like give a very much of a description of this, but I've spoken to computer scientists before, and when they describe just purely what a computer does, like input, some kind of integration, output, they can argue pretty convincingly that like the universe itself is a computer.
I understand.
So
I understand the claim, but the question was, what do we know about computing? Because I've heard you say before, the way you escape this deterministic epistemic flaw in naturalism is that you say, well, that's not true. I can point to computers and I can point to calculators. They spit out propositions and they're determined. Is that the case?
Yeah,
Okay.
and some computers don't work properly, but we know how to evaluate that.
Interesting.
Compare computers.
Is it true that calculators and computers need to be programmed by a mind?
The ones that we use, yeah.
So for you to use an analogy to try to escape determinism, you're actually necessitating a mind that if we're the calculator or the computer, it necessitates a mind that programmed us?
Us, no.
Well, then the analogy doesn't work.
I mean, I don't think that's really the case.
It is the case. You just said human beings are computational. I said interesting word, computation calculator, right?
But
what we know about computers and calculators is that they're determined by the mind who programs them. I can make a calculator say boobies. Is it the right answer? I can program a calculator that says 4 + 4 = pineapple, right? I can program that, right? The question is, how do you know the calculator is spitting out a true proposition or a conclusion or not? Guess what? It's never the calculator that determines that. It's the human. So that necessitates a mind. In fact, from his view, if he holds that human beings are anything like computers, he's actually doing the work for me. If theism is merely the universal mind that programs human computers, even if it was a deterministic universe, that's theism, not naturalism.
So by computational theory of mind, I'm just talking about how computers work, not what produces calculators. So the computational theory of mind is just about that. So you are basically just changing the subject when you say, oh yeah, well, where do computers come from? It's not about that. It's what creates the computers. Or it's and then I said that. It's about how they work.
Well, Peter, I understand what you're trying to say, but look, I'll get more.
I have to leave now.
Peterson, the other thing, though, even computation, we're dealing with information input, right? So you agree that for computation to work, you need an input that has a type of meaning, right, the code. You need a decoder, a system that actually transfer the information, or an encoder, sorry, and then you need a decoder, the human in this case, who's determining the meaning of this thing. So if you're talking about input, evaluation, output as just a purely determined sort of thing that's happening, you still are assuming something that naturalism can't account for, which is for computers to work in any meaningful way, you need meaning. You actually need meaning. You need meaning and information. This is a thing that naturalism can't account for. I ask 1 million naturalists on my live stream all the time, does information exist? They say, of course it does. I go, in what way? In what way does it exist? They can never answer this question. They're forced toward a materialistic lens that somehow isolates information as a particle or some substance that they can eventually find inside the brain. But this is a problem because the category itself that information is in, which would include truth, laws of logic, again, naturalism, if it's going to explain reality, but reality consists of metaphysics, information, naturalism has to explain information and metaphysics. You can't just use the thing that it denies to describe the thing that it sees. It just, that's all it is over and over again. It uses a category it denies, it describes what it sees. Well, sorry, you're using a whole slew of things that you don't see. Naturalism can't account for the things you don't see, that you use.
Yeah, I mean, you can't see descriptions. Descriptions just are that. But anyways, so we've only talked about naturalism so far, so we do have to discuss the other proposition that's up here. Mm-hmm. So how do you account for knowledge when, under your view, your mind could be supernaturally manipulated at any time and you can't know it?
It could be manipulated?
By the devil or by God himself?
Well, you would have to have knowledge of things that could be manipulated, right?
What?
To say, how do you know it's not being manipulated? You're assuming that there is knowledge of what's called manipulation and non-manipulation, right?
We're not doing my worldview anymore. This is according to theism.
Well, you're proposing that something already is the case under this view. So what theism are you arguing? That God manipulates minds?
I'm not the theist. You are.
Well, if you're talking about my view,
you're giving me the burden. It's my question to you.
How do I know?
It's not my burden.
Under my view, it's possible that our minds could be flawed. It's possible that we could be wrong. It's possible, under even my view, that we can be subject to some type of demonic realm, even, right? I grant all of that under my view, right? So the fact that something could be wrong or something could be right or something could be accurate or inaccurate is actually not a problem, because you can still ongoingly discover truth, right? You could participate in truth from my view.
Not if your mind's being manipulated, because you aren't discovering truth, because everything is a lie.
A lie necessitates
by
God.
Satan.
A lie necessitates God.
Explain that.
How do you have a lie without absolute truth?
I asked you to explain it.
I'm explaining it through a question. I'll say it then. To say something's deceptive assumes something's absolutely the case. That necessitates God. Things can't be absolutely the case without a God, because not only the natural world being regular and invariant in its processes, that has to be the case to gain knowledge. To gain knowledge, you have to assume something could be true or false. You're discovering it. You have to assume your faculties, right? God provides an account for our faculties. Our will, we have free will. That's a reflection of God creating us in his image. These things, he doesn't like the explanations, but they actually make way more sense than just saying, we're a pile of materialistic sludge that's always in flux. And by the way, my brain is a product of the sludge, which is more sludge in flux. But by the way, I don't believe in God, but I was determined to believe that anyway. Under my view, theism, even general theism, first starting with the category that I'm focusing on, metaphysical, right? You ask me an actual metaphysical question, right? How do you know you're not being lied to? Well, a lie, if I knew what a lie was, then that would necessitate something could be true. So your question actually aids me in my argument for theism, because you and I both hold one thing, at least in common. Truth is universal, absolute, and conceptual, for the sake of this debate.
I don't think so.
Okay, so is truth not absolute?
Well, no, because it's conditional.
Before
you were born, you didn't exist, so it wasn't true that Jimbob exists.
No, that's a proposition. So I'm not saying...
What's the status of the proposition, true or false?
Well, no, you're talking about second orders of statements, second order of truth claims. So I'm talking about first order, something just exists, right? So the truth itself, I didn't ask of whether or not we have to wait for something to be true. I'm saying truth itself. Is it absolutely the case when I am born that I exist? That's true, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, and conditional.
Okay, and it was true absolutely that before I was born I didn't exist, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. Is there any set of things that need to be true before you make propositions?
Is there any set of things that need to be true before you make propositions?
Yeah, like the past, and from your view, you probably think we evolved from bacteria and you have an uncle fish or something?
Yeah,
okay.
Fish, monkey, frog.
Fish, monkey, dog, fish, monkey, dog, puddle. So yeah, from that view, then there's a truth about the past. Well, this is another problem under naturalism. Naturalism has no access to the past. There's no empirical indication or evaluation. You can't evaluate the past directly. That's a thing you have to assume, right? To even do induction, you're assuming a past exists, that the current state of affairs reflects the past, and the future you're assuming seems like the past and the present. Under naturalism, he holds a past. He holds that truth is absolute and precedes human minds. It has to, because there's a state of affairs that need to exist before humans emerge from the pond scum, right? So if truth exists before we exist, how does naturalism account for that?
If truth exists, well, we would just be able to take in information from the environment. I'm not trying to like be
no. Before we can evaluate,
we've really only talked about naturalism so far.
Well,
I really
well,
have some theism questions for you.
No. Look,
we're like 30 minutes into open dialogue.
How do we talk?
Done me.
How do we talk about theism from a position that argues that talking is a determined effect that we have no control over?
You get to assume your worldview.
I'm assuming yours.
This is a good opportunity.
To justify your worldview, you are assuming my worldview?
Look, I can say
this is a
anything
good
right
opportunity.
now.
One second, I just want to jump in for a quick reset. Is that we do have about 25 minutes left for the open dialogue. So if you did want to cover other topics, it doesn't have to be now, but now is a good time if you guys want to rotate.
We just haven't really discussed theism like hardly at all, and I have some very important questions. So let's see. What do I want to talk about? So you think that like logic is absolute?
Objective, universal.
What?
Objective. You could use the word absolute, but you really don't need that. But yeah.
Okay, so it's
laws of logic.
Okay, sure. So let's pretend that the only. Well, would you agree that it is a logical statement to say that apples are not oranges?
Yeah.
That's like
rational.
That's like identity or whatever.
There's an identity, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's pretend that God's mind is the only thing that exists, because I think under your worldview that was the case at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so apples are not oranges. Is that statement still logical?
Before there's apples?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could. That could be contained in the mind of God, yeah.
But what is God? So what is God? Because you said earlier that like true statements have to be in reference to something. So how is God able to employ logic when there's nothing for God's mind to even reference?
Well, if God definitionally could reference anything in his mind and that contains all things, how is that a problem?
Well, because then all of a sudden God's... So now you've just added something else. You've said God has now had the... Well, here's the problem with this. Let's do a different example, like 2 + 2 = 4, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's true, and it's never been false before?
Yeah.
But if God's mind is the only thing that exists, and God says 2 + 2 = 5, is that statement true?
If he just declares that?
Yeah.
Well, if it was, it would have to be consistent. Like, so when you talk about numbers, you would have to 2 + 2 = 4 is a whole sequence, right? It's reflective of logic itself. Math is a derivative of logic. So the only way you make sense of 2 + 2 = 4 is that 2 has a value, right, and it maintains its identity, and there's a consequence to the identities coming together, and you get 4. Him just stating 2 + 2 = 5, that could only not make sense to you if you didn't know he changed the variables of the meaning of 2 and 2, right? So you can't just look at the one statement. The statement itself, the proposition in math, is reflective of logic, which has to hold identity. So all you're doing is, if God changed the identity of 4 to be 5, would it still be true? It would be true logically, but that's not a defeater. Then
logic isn't absolute, because you just said that 2 + 2 = 4 is an eternal truth.
No.
Unless God changes his mind, then all of a sudden 2 + 2 = 5 is true.
No.
That is what you said.
No, 2 + 2 = 4 would be a proposition that's downstream from something having to be true in the first place.
Well,
that's why I said logic.
Then it doesn't come from God. God has to follow the rules of math or logic.
God embodies the laws. Like, he can't be illogical or he can't lie, for instance. So like if you said God's nature, right? Truth is reflective of God's nature. You're still talking about truth from a propositional lens. I reject truth is reduced to propositions. You think truth
What is it then?
Well, what is truth? Truth is a person, from my view. But the thing is
a person?
A person, yeah. Yeah.
So God is true?
Yeah. Truth.
So if I say 2 + 2 = 4...
No, that's second order.
Or if somebody said to me, is 2 + 2 = 4 true, I could also say, yeah, 2 + 2 = 4 is God.
No. We're talking about the absolute source of all truth and knowledge. Then
isn't God an acceptable answer to any question? God. Because God is what true is. God.
Well, in a sense, yeah, actually. Yeah. That's consistent, but that's not a contradiction. So the thing is, when you ask, is 2 + 2 = 4, you're actually arguing from a some sort of it's a coherency theory of truth, right? Do you hold a correspondence theory of truth or a coherency?
That I don't know the difference between those.
Okay, correspondence is mostly what you do, which is like you look at the world and you make statements about the world and you see if it reflects, that which comports with reality, Matt Dillahunty stuff. But the thing is, your statements also have to be coherent, right?
Yeah, and I think if God's mind is the only thing that exists, then no statement is coherent because it's not in reference to anything, which means God can make 2 + 2 = 5 true and 2 + 2 = 4 is true. But a lot of times in these theological debates, they debate logic, like they'll ask you a question, they'll say, okay, is that true? Yes. Can it ever be false? No. So truth is eternal. But if God has the ability to do this, then it really kind of blows all that up. And that's why I wanted to talk about this.
No, it doesn't blow anything up, because all you're saying is God has the power to change propositional truths, which just makes him the source of all truth, which is my position. Like, you don't have access before creation, under my view, to evaluate 2 + 2 = 5 or 4, right? Right. If you're saying, well, what if God emanates a proposition, right, a mathematical proposition before all of creation? Can it be false? Well, no, it can't be false at all. Like, he can't say a false thing, right? What you're doing is assuming that math and logic somehow have their own ontology, under my view, absent God. I'm saying, under your view, math and logic and truth have zero ontology. That's why I asked you, what is the status of truth? You said you're here arguing the truth. It's fair to ask from you, under naturalism, what is the way truth exists in this reality, if you say it exists? I haven't gotten an answer.
Oh, yeah, you have. I've answered that like 3 or 4 times, actually.
You said it exists in descriptions, exists in evaluations, exists in propositions, which just moves the question over to, what way do those exist? Is it identical to the brain? Is it made of matter? Is it a set of patterns in one mind? For instance, you think the laws of logic exist, right?
I think they're purely grammatical.
Grammatical?
Yes.
How did you get grammatical without first assuming logic?
How do you get grammatical without assuming logic?
Yeah, just define grammatical for the audience.
Well, grammatical is like the rules that govern how language works.
Do those rules govern how nature works?
No, they describe it.
Okay, so you think the laws of logic are descriptions then?
Yeah, they're purely grammatical. Give a non-linguistic logical claim.
Okay, so how do you describe the laws of logic if descriptions need to assume logic exists first?
That was not a non-linguistic logical claim.
So you said the laws of logic exist as descriptions.
That was also not a non-linguistic logical claim. Can you do that?
In what way does the 3 laws of logic exist? In what way do they exist?
They are descriptive of like reality or whatever. They're so like you kind of said this earlier, because if it's not in reference to something, then it's a completely meaningless statement. Like Noam Chomsky has this really famous, completely nonsensical statement: colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Now, all of us agree that makes no sense whatsoever, because something can't be colorless and green. Ideas don't sleep. You can't sleep furiously. What the hell would that look like?
That's contextual, right? Though. That could make sense, though.
Yes, but how could that?
That could be a code word for someone to the building.
Because of everything we know about reality, it makes no sense. The way we know it is because what it references is not. It doesn't match
Peterson,
up with
if I
truth
said the
at
same
all.
thing right now, and a bodyguard knew what I meant, would that statement make sense? If I had a bodyguard right now and I felt threatened, if I uttered the words you just said, would it suddenly make sense in the world? What did you say? What did Chomsky say? Say the words.
Colorless green ideas sleep
that's
furiously.
Code for get in here, I'm in danger. Does it now make sense in the world?
So you just, like, if you privately set that up with somebody else, now you have granted it.
Yeah. So how do you know that?
Jimbob,
no, hold on.
But
how
Jimbob,
do you, no,
there's a huge problem with doing that.
Proved that he doesn't actually know if that makes sense or not, because that could very well have made sense.
Okay, disprove this then. I know what it means. I set up with a bodyguard in my brain. I set up with a bodyguard in my brain what that means, and you can't disprove it. I actually
I
just
wouldn't claim.
completely won the debate because I proved
won the
everything I need
debate?
to prove with that statement.
No, you just no. Even
It's just that I'm the only one that knows it.
Peterson, this could mean something to you. It means nothing to
Yeah,
me or the
and you
audience.
disprove it. Disprove my claim.
Why would I? Oh, you're claiming that it means something.
Yeah, no, specifically disprove.
Just that? I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, and when you do that thing where, oh, well, I'm going to take this nonsensical statement and then just claim it means something, therefore, ha ha.
So you're saying
that's what I just did.
So you're saying truth claims don't need to make sense?
No, they do need to make sense. They have to reference something.
Okay, and when you're referencing something, we're talking about information and meaning, right?
No, they can just reference like physical things, or it
meaning.
could reference a physical thing is not.
The referent
meaning.
is a physical thing. The reference to the physical thing is meaning, right? There's a referent and a word for the referent or a sound for the referent, right?
Yeah, but if I just say phone,
okay,
that's just what that thing is.
Okay. If you're using meaning, we both agree. I think that's your worldview. I think that's your worldview. The thing is, if you assume meaning, you're actually using something that's not identical to the referent. I'm saying under naturalism, you don't have a justification for the thing you're referring to the referent with. Meaning itself is not something we can hold, taste, touch, smell, weigh, or anything, right? So all of these categories, I could switch with, I could do knowledge, I could do information, I could do mind, I could do reasoning, I could do logic. In this case, meaning now, right? Meaning has to have some type of ontology under naturalism, correct?
Meaning has to have ontology?
Under naturalism.
Well, I don't think that descriptions are really ontologically existing.
Did that exist? Because you just described something. Are you gaslighting our audience?
No.
So did that utterance, was that a description?
I think so, yeah.
So it didn't exist?
Well, what do you mean it didn't?
What do you mean? You said it doesn't have an ontology. So if I say descriptions don't actually have any positive ontology, you're actually stating a description that we should deny its ontology of.
What you're doing is you're confusing the sounds coming out of my upper fart box or whatever that was we were talking about.
Right.
You're confusing that with whether or not those things like really exist.
Yes, so that's why the debate, if you at least grant me this, if the debate is what explains reality better, if I hold a view that reality consists of material and immaterial, and you said, no, I think it's just material, I'm trying to get you to say, do you believe that reality, the thing we're debating about, is purely material? Do you think it's purely material?
Reality itself?
Yeah.
I don't know if material or physical would be the best way to put it, but I mean, like, I kind of said this earlier, but I think there are probably non-physical things like light and energy, but physicalism or materialism still accounts for why they exist. Like light is electromagnetic radiation emitted by physical things, for example.
Well, I would say, you're saying, I think you meant physical things could exist that are not material.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put it.
So if there's a category called physical and or material, I'm asking you, do you think anything else exists other than those things that are physical and material?
I don't think so. I certainly don't see any evidence of
Okay,
any
well,
of them.
evidence would be begging the question, right? You only believe what you have evidence for, and as I demonstrated today, I almost said tonight
do you
again.
believe things that you don't have evidence for?
Yeah.
Like in the sense that you have presuppositions?
Oh, well, you have the same presuppositions that they exist, right?
Yeah, I know. This isn't a gotcha. I'm just asking what you mean.
Yeah. We assume, like to do science, you agree. Are you a science teacher?
I was.
Okay, cool. So you would agree that philosophy of science would be a set of conceptual categories and let's say heuristics to then pursue the activity of science, right? I would say that we all believe in immaterial things. I listed them in my opener. Information is immaterial, non-physical. Meaning is immaterial, non-physical. Truth, immaterial, non-physical. Laws of logic, immaterial and non-physical. The mind necessarily would be immaterial and non-physical. The consequences of it being material it leads into the determinism problem where he has to argue that we're calculators. So these are a slew of things, mathematics, immaterial, non-concrete. So I'm simply holding a position that reality consists of materiality, concrete, and non-materiality, abstract. And a worldview needs to account for both of those, not just as separate categories, but the unity between the two of them, which is a whole other awesome debate. But so from your view, if the world itself is purely material, and you said, I don't believe in anything that's non-physical or non-material, you've just argued knowledge doesn't exist. You argued information doesn't exist. You argued your own mind doesn't exist.
No, I don't think I've
That's
done
an
that at all.
entailment.
I want to talk about theism some more here because we still
theism.
really haven't talked about it. So could you just tell me something in the world that you think theism is responsible for?
I think theism's responsible for the world.
Okay, could you explain
regularity
that?
of nature. I would say the regularity of nature, the maintained identity of objects, universals and particulars over time.
Could you explain that?
Well,
how that is? How does theism do that?
How does theism account for it?
Yeah, how does it do that?
Well, everyone has an origin story, so mine happens to be non-physical. Because non-physical things exist and they're conceptual in nature, I'm arguing that there's a source for these concepts that are invariant, that precede us.
Yeah, that's the thing in question. There is a God, and theism is true. It's
I can make an argument
for this.
No, I can make a
non-circular.
I could make a non-circular argument. Truth is universal and conceptual. Do you agree with premise one?
Not exactly, but
to disagree is to assume premise one. You're in a contradiction.
Well, again, I think some truths are conditional, but
that would be a truth claim that needs to be universal.
Okay, so we can grant P1 here.
You should grant P1 because denying it would assume it. So premise one is truth is universal and conceptual. Concepts are mind dependent or associated with mind. Do you agree with that? Is there any concept you can think of that's not oriented or based in a mind?
I don't think this thing has any ideas or concepts, no.
What?
Like, this is not a mind, so I don't think it has those things. So I'm
That's not a
agreeing with you.
concept.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, you agree.
You said they're mind dependent.
Oh, you just say yes. Okay, yeah. So if premise one is truth is universal and conceptual, and premise two is concepts are dependent on a mind or come from a mind or reside in a mind, it totally follows from my position, the conclusion. I could argue that because human beings are particulars, we can't actually ground universal concepts. We can discover them, but we can't ground them. For instance, truth being universal and conceptual, that can't only exist in your mind or mine, right? We're particulars, right?
Sure.
Okay.
This isn't an explanation of anything.
Hold on.
Though.
No,
a deduction isn't an explanation.
Look.
How does God do this?
Are you saying arguments aren't a type of evidence?
No.
Okay. Do you
an
agree
argument
that
isn't
an argument's not a type of evidence? There goes the justice system.
No, because they use evidence.
Well, no, you have to argue for the evidence.
They present the evidence in the form of language.
Arguments.
But that's not what...
What is evidence without an argument?
It still exists, even if I'm not there to make.
By the way, arguments don't exist under his worldview anyway. So you're asking, I'm giving you an argument for why I can actually argue. I can actually take a position to give an ontology for truth, and you can't.
But that's just a claim. I want an explanation.
Not a claim. No, arguments aren't just claims.
Explain how God does it.
He's dodging the argument. He doesn't want to deal with the argument.
I'm asking you the question. I'm not dodging anything.
I'm giving you an argument, okay? If truth, you're asking why does theism make sense under this view? I'm telling you, we have to start from truth. If you argue truth doesn't exist, if we argue from a position where we don't have to justify truth, what are we doing? We're just pretending truth exists? Hey, argue the second part of the argument. No, I'm cornering you, and I'm cornering myself right now, because before we get to secondary propositions about reality, you have to assume truth exists, okay? I asked you, does it exist? You said yes, right? You tried to argue that it didn't exist universally and conceptually and absolutely, right? That's a contradiction. Now, to finish my argument, if premise one is truth is universal and conceptual, and concepts come from a mind, and we agree that we're all particulars. Not a single person in this room is the source for the universal category of truth, right? Not one person in here, right? We're all particulars. It's reasonable to say human beings who are particulars cannot ground themselves. They can't be the grounding for universal concepts. What I'm arguing is that a universal mind can do that.
Okay, I mean, that's your claim.
That's an argument. Challenge one of the premises.
So the topic of this debate was what best explains reality. So if I grant that I can't give a naturalistic explanation for all this like abstract meta stuff, okay,
you can't do science.
Those are a couple of things that I can't do, but we're talking about reality, which is so much more than that. So you said God is responsible for the world. Explain.
I believe that God is responsible for the world. Are you asking for a naturalistic explanation?
No, I'm asking for a theistic one, because
I believe God created from his free will, he spoke into existence the world.
So if I had if you asked me these kinds of questions and I just said, oh, it happened naturally as the answer to every single question, then I'm not explaining anything by saying it happened naturally. When you say God did it through his power, by his sovereignty, you're not giving an explanation. You're just giving a declaration and really nothing else. So how did God create the world?
All you're doing is presupposing naturalism to be what an explanation is.
Because I'm asking you the question, you get to adopt your worldview. It has nothing to do with
it does. You're using the word explanation. No, hold on.
When I ask you questions, it's not according to me.
It is, though.
It's according to you.
What's an explanation? You're using the word explanation.
You get to assume your own worldview to do
My
this.
explanation is the impossibility. It's the impossibility of the contrary. It can't be naturalism because it's endless regress.
Could you explain how God created the world?
Supernaturally.
That's not an explanation.
It's a claim.
So you don't have an explanation for that.
We're talking about reality.
Yes, and you can't explain it.
Well, explain would assume naturalism, right? You can't explain a mind, and yet here you are pretending you have one.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't. Do it.
I absolutely can.
Do it. Naturalism, explain the mind.
We're talking. See, you're running away from theism because you don't have any explanations.
No, I'm not running because in your question you're assuming naturalism.
I'm not. I'm telling you,
Peterson.
According to theism, how did God create the world?
Supernaturally.
And that's not an explanation.
You asked me how.
Okay, ask me whatever question you want about anything. Well, related to the debate. No, don't get into my personal life.
How does naturalism produce a mind?
Naturally.
Yeah, but here's the category difference, right? Do you agree naturally would be one category and supernaturally would be another?
No, because there's no such thing as anything other than nature, so it's all naturally. It
instantiates
and substantiates all, right. All possible propositions and claims and blah, blah, blah,
okay.
blah, blah.
Okay, cool. So he just
did what you did.
He just exposed that his entire epistemic foundation.
I exposed you.
No.
I'm doing a Jimbob.
I'm distinguishing
it happened naturally.
Categories. I'm distinguishing categories, okay? So
we're looking for explanations.
Which you think is confined to naturalism, right?
And when it was your turn to do it according to your worldview, you won't.
Because
you can't.
He's trying to say,
and then
he's trying to say the only explanation for anything needs to be naturalism. When I spent an hour exposing all of the things he accepts without a natural explanation.
We both have presuppositions.
Cool. Whose are more coherent?
Nobody can't. The one that best corresponds with reality, which is mine. Yours has no evidence. You admitted it when you said it happened magically.
Dude, okay.
Explain how God did anything.
If we agree that we're actually just doing presup on each other, right? If you agree with that, welcome to presuppositionalism, by the way. So if you agree that you're a presupper and I'm a presupper,
I'm not,
and I presuppose a mind that's behind the invariant things that you and I both appeal to, why? Why is it reasonable? Because the category that they're in. You don't have a category for truth. Information, knowledge, laws of logic. You can't even justify that you can do science under your view. And you're
I can. It happens naturally.
That's not an no.
That's not an explanation.
No.
How did God create the world?
Supernaturally.
That's not an explanation.
The explanation. Okay. Do you agree that an explanation for natural things, you actually have what's called methodological naturalism?
I think you need a working model, and I can give you
a working model, which needs to be naturalism.
Naturalism needs to be the working model?
Look, the only acceptable thing he'll take for God creating the universe, which would not be in the category of naturalism, is naturalism. So he's going, give me an answer inside of naturalism, how God created the world.
I'm not doing that. You can describe it however you want, but I said this in my opening statement. You can't do that because nobody knows how magic or supernatural events happen or how God does anything.
Peterson.
All you can do are make declarations like it happened supernaturally.
Peterson. 1 minute left.
For truth claims, is there only one way to explain a truth claim?
Yeah, naturally.
What? So not philosophically?
Naturally is the only way to do it.
Okay, so you deny that there's philosophical conclusions you can come to.
Those are just part of nature.
Are they?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So there's no distinction between philosophy and nature?
No, I said philosophy is part of nature. If we were drawing a circle, it'd be a big circle. That's nature. Inside that circle is philosophy.
Where's that?
And a different part of that circle would be like, I don't know, math.
Where? This is what I'm drawing out. It's an old fallacy called crackers in the pantry fallacy by Bonson, which is to say all truth claims have to be arrived at through the same methodology. So what he's doing is he's taking his naturalistic presuppositions and saying anything that's claimed at all needs to fit through this naturalistic paradigm, which is empiricism, even though he doesn't actually believe that, because he grants himself all of the things that I've harped on him for, right? All of these things can't be produced by naturalism or accounted for naturalism. He just says they just exist. Well,
you grant yourself God.
I could just say
prove God.
Yeah. I could.
You grant yourself God.
You grant yourself that these things just exist, so I can grant myself that God exists.
Then why are you criticizing me for it if you have to do the same thing?
Because the holistic worldview, from my view, makes more sense than yours.
How does it make more sense?
Because reality consists of material and non-material.
How is God responsible for either thing?
I've necessitated through an argument. You didn't engage with any of the premises, by the way. I necessitated a mind with my argument. You didn't actually engage with any of the premises.
So a deduction is your idea of an explanation?
Deduction could be an explanation, sure.
How does it explain it?
Can you necessitate something being true from deduction?
I'll give you a chance to respond. Then
Tautologically, yeah. If you wanted to do it otherwise, some deductions have inductive, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore he is mortal.
Okay.
Premise one is actually inductive, so it's reasoned by prior evidence that premise one is true. Mm-hmm. So, literally, problem of induction means that conclusion actually isn't guaranteed. Socrates might end up living forever.
If my argument that I posed to you about truth, right? I argued that you don't have an ontological category for truth. I do.
I do.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do. It exists in nature. It's
Where?
Natural.
That's your claim.
In nature.
Where?
In nature.
Yeah.
This might be a good time to go into the Q&A.
Probably.
What is it made of?
We are going to take questions right down this middle row, and ideally if you can line up just along the tape here, and then if you can stand right about here where my hand is, and we'll get us rolling. Excellent discussion, gentlemen. Excellent openings. This has been a fantastic debate. I loved it. But yes, we're ready for you.
Eric, so I was wondering how you would personally explain love, because you think everything is physical. Science can explain the butterfly feelings, the urge to touch that person, and the feeling of happiness while being with that person, but science can't explain why we love certain people over others, or even what love is if everything is physical.
Hello? Check. Naturally. No, I'm just kidding. So I totally reject what you just said. Science can absolutely demonstrate those questions about love that you just had. This is really fun. I was actually having this exact conversation with somebody, I think yesterday. I don't remember who it was. They might actually be in this room. So we don't, no parent loves their child when they're 30 as much as they did when they were a baby, right? seems kind of harsh, but that's true. Nobody even loves their child when they're 5, still a little kid, as much as they did when they were a baby, right? There is
Someone's not a father yet.
No, the amount of emotional attachment and dedication that parents have to newborns is just overwhelmingly more strong than they do. Does anybody walk up to a 30-year-old and like grab their little toes and be like, we made this?
My mom still does that.
And do stuff like that. I mean, I hope not. But anyways, there's absolutely like an evolutionary explanation for that. It would be advantageous because when our infants are at their youngest, they're at their most vulnerable, and so the feeling, like the compelling feeling that you have to nurture them and to love them that much is absolutely like beneficial like evolutionarily, I guess I would say.
Where would I like find that? Like, where has scientists ever said that they know that scientifically?
Well, again, that's just a description. So we're just talking about behavior in this case. So like, why do humans, like when somebody sneezes next to you, you do that, right? Notice what you're doing. You're closing your eyes tightly. You're pushing your lips up to close your nose, and you're turning away. Why that behavior? Scientifically, there's a good explanation, because when they sneeze, they throw germs at you, and if you do this, you block off all the entry points for those germs. So that's a behavior that is pretty adequately described by like evolution, and I think love can do the same thing. Like, none of you give a shit about me, right? You're not related to me. Your genes won't get passed down if I die, so who cares?
I love
right?
you.
We'll go to the next one.
I'm just saying you don't love me. I would help any of you out, but I'm just saying you don't love me. Or maybe you do.
So my question pertains to the argument you made against Jimbob regarding the propositions being incoherent because God would be the only thing that exists in that hypothetical. But there is still a referent because it's suspended in an abstract state because it hasn't been actualized yet, right? So therefore 2 + 2 = 4 is still true if God's mind is the only thing that exists, but it would just be different in the way that it's true. So concrete versus abstract truths. So how does your worldview account for abstract truth, like the actual laws themselves, like laws of logic and mathematics, if truth is a characteristic of a proposition, if you think that something has to be concretized or materialized in order for a proposition to even exist for it?
Right. So if you say 2 + 2 = 5 and I say 2 + 2 = 4, you can actually mathematically prove that by the rules or laws or whatever you call it in math. Like you can do a proof basically of it. We make up the rules for what that is. So for an abstract thing like math or language, it is validated by its own rules. Like grammar, like if you say a sentence and it's grammatically incorrect, the only way that we can, like, that I could demonstrate that or whatever is by using grammar. It's recursive. I don't think it's circular, it's recursive. And math does the same thing. According to the rules of math, which we kind of arbitrarily set up, but I think mathematics does reflect nature as well, you can prove things according to that system that we invented.
Sure. So you would say then that numbers are concrete? Because your argument necessitated for him that there has to be a concrete referent in order to make a proposition about it. So how can you make mathematical propositions if they're not concrete?
Because I think mathematics is conceptual as well. I'm not a mathematical Platonist. So a statement like 2 + 2 = 4 is just a tautology. It's the same thing as saying a bachelor is somebody who isn't married. Why aren't they married? Because they're a bachelor. So it's just a tautology.
I want to keep it varied. So does anybody have a question for Jimbob? Okay, come on up in blue.
Hey, thanks for the debate, guys. Jimbob, could you explain, you mentioned teleology a little bit before. Can you just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, purpose itself. We're talking about purpose. A lot of times it's referred to like a higher purpose. Is there any meaning or higher purpose to reality itself? Naturalists would say no, but I would bring that down a level and say, well, is there any purpose to being here? I didn't get to ask Peterson, but is there any real purpose of being here for your view?
Yeah, we're debating.
No, is there a purpose for debating, I mean?
Is there a
from a naturalistic view? Not from your preference. Like, ultimately, under a naturalistic paradigm, is there any purpose to debating?
So I believe in a dysteleological universe, but I kind of wanted to talk about this. I don't want to take away time from people that are asking questions and paid to do that. But you said Peterson granted blah 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 blah. You're granting teleology. You didn't justify it. You just sort of grant yourself that. So I thought that was a little curious.
Well, okay.
Aren't you granting dysteleology by that logic, though?
So to me, I don't really think so, because either the rock is either there or it isn't there. One is a positive claim. Saying I believe in a dysteleological universe isn't actually a positive claim, because I think the teleology is something that needs to be inserted as a property or something of the universe. But I take my position as the nascent position.
But isn't your brain a part of the universe?
Yep.
So then your brain has no purpose?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll go to the next one.
I got a question for Eric. And so I basically just want to summarize what it sounds like most of the debate was. And the premise, or at least the prompt of the debate, has to do with the explanatory power between naturalism and theism. And most of your debate was focusing on inductive methods, empiricism, scientific methods in which we come to knowledge claims. Well, that really doesn't differentiate from the theistic paradigm, because science and what Jimbob's arguing for the regularity of nature and the metaphysical structures underneath it are what condone and provide the ability for scientific explanation. So in regards to the prompt of explaining nature, really it gets back into a macro perspective, not this micro in regards to the scientific methods and things that we can come to. And that's where the theistic paradigm is going to explain reality more, because you're going to eventually fall back onto the Big Bang Theory, which empiricism itself wouldn't be able to define or come to any sort of conclusion on. You could appeal to a multiverse or something like that, but by appealing to God from the onset, as Jimbob did, he actually provides a descriptive explanation to reality that is more promising and more coherent than anything a naturalist paradigm could provide.
Magic is incoherent, so
What does magic
I
have to do with
disagree with that. But when I asked him to explain anything, all he said was supernaturally. I don't know. I don't actually know what you tried to argue there, that God is responsible for science or something like that. But that's not an explanation.
It is. Yep. So God is responsible for the regularity of the laws of logic, number theory, everything that he was laying out, these universals, and that your inability to provide something that actually grounds those. Therefore, the theistic worldview actually provides an explanatory power that is superior to anything
That's
a
just
naturalist.
a claim.
Because
It's not an explanation of anything.
it is.
Nature has regularity, and God made it that way. Isn't an explanation. If all I do is agree with you on the second part, that nature has regularity, that's purely naturalistic. That's how I would just go about doing science.
Well, you need to catch up with the state of
first premise
philosophy.
doesn't do anything.
The postmodern turn in philosophy is all about the realization that these unified theories, incomplete.
This is like turning into a debate. I need a question.
Yeah.
So, the state of modern philosophy is dealing and comparing based on coherency models. This is really the postmodern turnover in the 1960s. So you then referring back to correspondence really does not actually address the point or the contention about the explanatory power between these paradigms.
Okay. If we don't have time for some of you that wanted to ask me a question, I'll be out there. Just come talk to me in the hallway.
If you want to respond to that, though, you can.
Well, it wasn't a question.
What's up, Eric? So I heard you allude to this in the earlier debate that you did with Jake, and you said an example there, and you alluded to it during this debate. When you said that if everybody in the room thinks your shirt is orange, there's a consensus of what corresponds to reality.
Yep.
Would that lead to, if everyone in this room says that God is the better explanation for reality, would that be a consensus that corresponds to reality?
That would be true about what they believe. Yeah, but then we would just be describing what their belief is. The claim about my shirt, at least I can look at my shirt and we can tell whether or not those claims match. But when you all say, well, I believe in God, then I'm going to be like, where is it? I get that you all believe it, but where is it?
Just like, where's the facts?
Well, no, sorry. I won't follow up.
Hey, Eric. In your hypothetical of the boulder, you focus only on the ontology of the boulder itself and its surroundings, its size, the grade of the hill, and the physical conditions surrounding it to shift causation. But in doing so, you overlook another part of the ontology that your own scenario establishes, God. You only talked about his physical existence, but if God is present on the hill and acknowledged as real within the hypothetical, then his whole ontological nature must also be included. And since God's nature inherently includes causal power as its entailment, would you agree that just because you are unaware of him enacting that causation, in fact influenced naturalism in the boulder and the hypothetical?
Could you say the last part of that again?
Yeah. Would you agree that just because you are unaware of him enacting that causation, in fact influenced the naturalism in the boulder and the hypothetical?
Yeah, actually, I actually didn't assume that I don't know how the boulder. I literally granted it in a sense that we actually see God do this thing, and we can see God there. But the point for that hypothetical was we're talking about explaining reality, and even though I grant the existence of God and him doing this one miracle for sure, everything else that we would be able to know or understand or explain about what's going on is only accomplishable naturalistically, because the properties of the rock, how it relates to its environment, there's no supernaturalism invoked in any of that, and it doesn't explain anything else.
Well, if he exists, then yeah. Sorry, I'll just go.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, if God exists, I still think naturalism best explains reality, and Enlightenment Christian philosophers felt the same way too.
We have time for two last questions.
My question's for Eric. I'm just kind of wondering, when I was even just in line listening, and you're trying to explain, you're trying to measure love or quantify love or say that they can somehow put a measurement on how much love you love your kids. But if you didn't see when you said your response, you said how it's measured is that, you said when it's measured that when your kids get older, you don't love them as much. Well, I think half the people in here looked at you like you were insane. So I think trying to measure love and put it in the category of, I think that's what Jimbob's trying to show you, is putting love in the category of this. It needs to be measured in a different category. I don't think empiricism can measure love. That's just, it sounds miserable and insane to even come to the conclusion that
well,
how can you reconcile the two and expect to convince anybody of anything? Because that sounds miserable. Because I have two kids and they're older, and so.
So the first part of what you're talking about is some things are only really qualitatively descriptive, not quantitative. So I agree. We can't measure love necessarily. It's more like a qualitative description, but you can actually.
Do you really think that when you get to 30 that you're not?
Yes. So I was going to address
kids as much. You really believe that?
So this is I get everybody's reaction to this. It was more extreme than I was expecting. But literally, we've done polls on this with people. You can ask people if your house was on fire and it was your teenager in one room, your newborn baby in another room. You can only save one. Who are you going to save? Overwhelmingly, people choose to save the baby, and it's one of these messed up.
I love my kid.
We don't have a turn.
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying the feeling of love that you have is just deeper with them, is what I would say.
All right, so I got two questions. You said truth is a descriptive.
There's only one question. That's a rule.
Oh, what?
There can be a follow-up question, but I don't.
Oh,
you can ask me out there.
Okay, then I'll do my second one. Can you both give a transcendental argument for your worldview?
Is there a naturalistic transcendental argument?
I don't.
I think it's
I don't
something
think there is.
There's no, under naturalism, there is no transcendental category, right?
Yeah, probably not. Reality is all that there is, or the universe is the ultimate, only existing thing, and it contains everything. So it doesn't really but you can make the argument. A lot of physicists, when they respond to fine-tuning, they argue things like pi is not actually part of what a circle is, but it just sort of it's emergent isn't the right word. I can't remember the word, but it's an underlying structure or something within it. And some scientists, when they investigate fine-tuning, they think that there may be like underlying structures that come out through the universe. Like, so why are the constants what they are? Maybe there's just an underlying, like, dark energy may be the cosmological constant. That's an example of that. So that would be like the closest thing to something that's transcendent. But
well, yeah, I would just add to that. Yeah, I would say it would be incoherent for a naturalist to argue anything transcendental, because I think the worldview denies anything immaterial or non-physical, as we listed them in the debate. But a basic transcendental argument usually comes in the form of a disjunctive syllogism, which is like, God is a necessary precondition for knowledge. Knowledge exists, therefore God. I would even swap a knowledge for truth, as I do commonly in my debates. I would say that a universal mind is required, a precondition for truth, for universal truth. Universal truth exists, therefore that mind exists. Who the mind is and how we know about them is a separate debate, hence his question of creation, right? Well, this debate isn't just about, wouldn't be about how it is that we have reality. It's actually, the debate was about describing the reality that we do have. Now, theism, I would argue, better describes the reality we do have, even if he rejected the supernatural creation claim, right? If we just both granted ourselves the way reality is, my worldview accounts for the transcendental categories, and I use them, and I can do science. His worldview only accounts for science and empiricism and sense data analysis, but he rejects the transcendental category, which is a type of performative contradiction. He's appealing to something he denies.
We're going to wrap up with that, folks, but please join me in giving our speakers a round of applause. That was a tremendous debate. Fantastic work. It was a great, great debate.